Okay, great. Well, we are recording now. Welcome to our second live chat for Supply Chain Management 210. My name is Joshua Eaton, and I look forward to engaging with everybody this evening. First, thank you so much for taking the time to attend tonight's chat. And for those listening to the archive recording, all you need to do is send me a message or your instructor a message through the virtual classroom that you were in attendance, and you will get those 15 points of extra credit. And for those that are attending live right now, all you need to do is also just submit a quick snapshot that, hey, I was there for the live chat, and you'll get those 15 points of extra credit as well, okay? So
Okay,
we, looks
hello
like,
everybody.
hey, how are you? Who was just talking?
It's Al.
Hey, Al, how are you?
Doing all right. Storming here.
Yeah, it's
Uh-oh.
storming here too. Where are you living at?
Mountains in North Carolina.
So I've spent a number of years in North Carolina. I was in Sanford for quite some time. Are you
Yeah, I'm
familiar
in
with Sanford?
yeah, I'm in Waynesville.
Okay, nice. I'm in New York and we're storming here also. So I see Craig raised his hand. Do you have a question, Craig?
That was actually me.
Oh, no worries.
Just letting you know I was here. It's not showing that I'm active.
No, you're fine. All you need to do is for the extra credit for Unit 2, just post to the assignment that you were in attendance, and your instructor should give you those extra credit points, okay?
All right. Okay.
And if you have any challenges with that, just reach out to me, and I can assist, okay? All right, well, great. Well, welcome to our second live chat for Supply Chain Management 210. We'll go ahead and get started. As I said before, I'm Dr. Josh Eaton. I also teach Supply Chain Management 210. Some of you are in my section, some of you are not. For those that are not, I look forward to hearing from you. As we go through the live chat tonight, if you ever have a question or comment, feel free to unmute your microphone or speak up through the chat, okay? All right, so first I want to introduce you to the Supply Chain Management homepage. You can see at the bottom, there is a link to a Supply Chain Management homepage. If you were to copy that, it's a great area for resources for supply chain management courses. And if you would like a copy of these live chat slides, just shoot me an email and I can send those to you, okay? So what I'll do is, let me open up the chat and I'm gonna copy my email address and I'm gonna put it in the chat box. Give me 1 second.
Sorry, I'm late, sir.
Oh, you're fine. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna copy my address. Give me 1 second.
He's not going. No, I'm just going up the thing.
This is where we can go to get the Unit 2 discussion board information.
Give me 1 second and I'll go over that. So there's my email address. That should work. That's if you would like a copy of the live chat slides, I can share it there. And so this is a great source for information for the Supply Chain Management 210 information. If you need help finding resources or articles, please reach out to either myself or your instructor, okay? Okay, so before going into a discussion on the Unit 2 assignments, were there any questions on the Unit 1 work? Basically, all you had to do for Unit 1 is your IntelliPath and your introductory posts. So any questions on that?
No.
No.
Okay. All right, great. Well, if there are questions on that, please let me know. And let me just check the chat to make sure everybody's good. Okay, it appears everybody is good so far. All right, so let's go into the Unit 2 assignments. I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share the virtual classroom. So give me 1 second. And if you have your hand raised for any reason and I haven't addressed you, please just speak up or post your question as a question to the chat box, because there's a lot of people named Craig Williams. So I don't know exactly, who's who because of how we're doing these master chats, okay? So what I'm gonna do is share the virtual classroom. You should be able to see it now. And I'm gonna go to the assignment list. And for Unit 2, you have 2 main assignments. Your first is your discussion board work. As you know, your primary discussion board post is always due on Fridays. Okay, so by Friday, what I'd like you to do is cover the following. Supply chain strategy includes a long-range plan for the design and ongoing management of a supply chain decisions that define the structure, function, facilities, and priorities of the supply chain. Competitive priorities differentiate companies from their competitors to gain a competitive advantage. Discuss the building blocks of supply chain strategy and detail the elements of each. How does the supply chain strategy support the business strategy? What are competitive priorities and how do they help supply chain organizations gain competitive advantage? So that's your primary post and it's due by Friday. By Tuesday, I'd like you to respond to at least 2 of your classmates. Here, I'm just looking for an interesting engagement between you and your classmate on what you learned from their posting, what additional questions you might have, what clarification do you need, and what are the differences or similarities you see between your posting and your classmates' posting. So that's your first assignment, which is your discussion board work. So any questions on your discussion board assignment for Unit 2?
No.
No, I'm good.
No.
Okay. All right, the other assignment for Unit 2 is your IntelliPath. Everybody is pretty familiar with IntelliPath. There are 3 steps to completing it. First step is to complete your determined knowledge by Friday. This will guide you on your learning path. Step 2 is to actually complete your learning path. And step 3 is to complete your practice and revision. So let me get a kind of an azimuth check on how IntelliPath is going. So is everybody enjoying IntelliPath?
Yes.
Good. And I'm just checking the chat real quick. Okay, so everybody is. All right, good, good. Hey, so the great thing about IntelliPath is you can always go back and improve your scores. So, if you want to get back and improve your Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3 scores, you can always go back and do that, okay? And when you do, just shoot your instructor an email that if they could please reprocess the IntelliPath scores, and they'll do that, okay?
All right.
All right, so let me go back to the assignment list. And those are your main assignments for Unit 2. And you'll see the Unit 2 live chat extra credit. All you have to do there is provide a statement that you were in attendance, or if you are listening to the archive recording, just submit a quick summary of what was covered during the live chat. So I'm going to stop sharing now and go back to the presentation that I had. Okay, so I have a live chat 1 review, which is what I typically cover in my first live chat. Now I understand that you attended another instructor's live chat, so I'll go ahead and skip this because he or she may have covered different things. So I'm going to go into what we're going to cover tonight, which is supply chain network redesign and decision making. This is the outline that we're going to cover. We'll go over drivers of supply chain network redesign or design, the process of comprehensive supply chain network design, major locational determinants, modeling approaches for supply chain network design, and omni-channel network design. So let's look at what are the drivers of supply chain network redesign. So before I go over the 7 that I have here, what are your thoughts?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Basically, when a company has to redesign their supply chain, what are some of the drivers or motivating factors that lead to that? What are your thoughts?
If one way of shipping a raw product or material out becomes more expensive or less expensive.
Cost.
That's excellent. Yeah, definitely. Cost is a huge factor. Where there is a comparative advantage on getting raw materials or components, definitely helps and definitely drives supply chain network design and redesign. So that's a great comment. Who else?
Efficiency.
Yes, efficiency. So yes, cost and efficiency. And
Changes.
yep, definitely. And for those that are asking for
Availability.
the live chat presentation, just shoot me an email and I can send it to you. Okay. Availability, yes. Access. So the ones we're going to talk about are changes in global trade patterns, changes in customer service requirements. We'll talk briefly about the emergence of omni-channel supply chain. We can actually have an entire course on omni-channel supply chains and designs. We'll briefly cover that today. Shifts in customer and or supply market locations, changes in corporate ownership, merger and acquisition activity, corporate organizational change, cost pressure, and competitive capabilities. A lot of those were covered already. So when we look at a supply chain network design process, we have a deliberate 6-step process that one would follow and a company should follow. Number one, and we'll cover each of these in a lot more detail moving forward, but I'm going to cover them, kind of wave tops right now. First, define the process steps. Step 2 is to perform a supply chain audit. Step 3, examine network alternatives. Step 4 is to conduct facility location analysis. Step 5 is your network decision making. 6 is your developing your implementation plan. You're going to treat this as a project with a clear start and finish. And as you can see by those dashed lines with arrows, it's an iterative process. You may be on step 4 or 5, and it may bring you all the way back to some of the preceding steps if new information is uncovered. So let's go into each of those steps in a bit more detail. So step 1, define the supply chain network design process. You need to form a supply chain network transformation team. Establish the parameters and objectives of the network design or redesign process. Evaluate the potential involvement of third-party suppliers of logistics service. Here we're talking about 3PL companies that provide different supply chain requirements for your company, whether it be distribution, warehousing, or inventory management software, or auditing, or other data management type activities.
That's in the IntelliPath.
What's that now?
That's in the IntelliPath. You'll learn about the 3P.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. What else?
We also learn about the fourth person too.
Okay, good.
I did when I did my IntelliPath.
Well, that's great to hear.
It was interesting.
It sounds like you're learning a lot from IntelliPath. That's great to hear. So let's talk about step 2, performing a supply chain audit. Here, what we're looking for is fundamental business information, logistics, supply chain systems, like what are the systems being incorporated or used? What are the key logistics and supply chain activities? How are you performing measurement and evaluation? What are those key metrics and KPIs that your company is tracking? What are the strategic logistics and supply chain challenges? And what about the logistics and supply chain strategic plan that is in place right now? The whole point of the supply chain audit is to uncover all the information that can help inform your new supply chain design. Step 3 is to examine the supply chain network alternative. Here, you're going to apply suitable quantitative models to the current system and consider alternatives that could replace that system. You'll need to identify preliminary supply chain network design solutions, which are consistent with the objectives identified during the audit phase. And a critical step here is to conduct what-if analysis to test the sensitivity of the recommended network design. What-if analysis is basically saying if a particular input parameter to the model is changed, for example, fuel costs or raw material costs, will that influence where your supply chain nodes are located? It's checking the sensitivity of your design based on changing parameter inputs. And the only way you can do that is through robust quantitative modeling approaches, which is not the purpose of this course, but maybe the purpose of future courses if you continue in the realm of supply chain management. To give a little more perspective here, I teach a supply chain management course where we develop very quantitative models in Excel using Risk Solver platform, where we identify what those nodes and arcs are, and we have numerous parameter inputs to the model. And when we run Risk Solver platform, it spits out a prescribed course of action. And that's one of the modeling approaches that we'll cover here later in this chat from a high level standpoint. Step 4 is to conduct a facility location analysis. Here, you want to form a location selection team. So what are your thoughts on that? Why is it important to form a location selection team? Why is that important?
Each location can be different.
To know where you're at, to know the
Good,
location
good.
where you're at.
That's good. What else? Any other thoughts?
To transport the products.
Okay, good.
Transport goods from one facility to another.
Good.
Need a selection team so they can find stuff you missed.
Right.
Okay, those are great comments. Excellent comments. I'm just checking the chat real quick to know the challenges and benefits of location. Okay, good. Excellent. So what for me is, you may not be the expert of that location, especially if maybe you're trying to expand on a global scale. You most certainly need to form a location selection team who has, who's privy to the specifics of that location. So let's look at qualitatively and quantitatively analyzing the attributes of specific region locales. They can assist with that. And they can also assist with identifying recommended sites for logistics facilities. Step 5 is to make decisions regarding network and facility locations. Here, you're going to evaluate the recommended network and specific sites for those logistics facilities for consistency with the design criteria identified in step 1. Step 6 is to develop an implementation plan. Here, you're going to develop a blueprint for change as a roadmap for moving from the current supply chain network to the desired new one. You're going to commit the resources necessary to assure a smooth, timely implementation and the continuous improvement of the network decisions. Basically, you're going to treat this as a project with a clearly defined start and a clearly defined end date to implement that new supply chain network design. So before moving into a discussion on major locational determinants, are there any questions on what we've covered so far?
No.
No, I'm
No.
good.
Okay, let's talk about major locational determinants. So from a global, national, and regional standpoint, we're going to look at labor climate, transportation services and infrastructure, proximity to markets and customers, quality of life, taxes and industrial development incentives, supplier networks, land costs and utilities, IT infrastructure, and company preference. From a site-specific determinant standpoint, we'll look at transportation access, whether it be truck, air, rail, or water. Is the location inside or outside the metropolitan area? What about the availability of workforce and needed skill sets, land costs and taxes, and utilities? So based on these global, national, and regional determinants or site-specific determinants and your professional background or experience, what are your thoughts? Do you see these as valid determinants in designing a supply chain? Why or why not?
Yes.
Definitely transportation, because you can't get there, you don't have the product.
Good. I agree completely. What else?
I know that some finished products, they have to be stored in certain areas in certain places.
Yeah.
And I know that, like, take example, things that are transported by boat, across seas, that's got to be something that has a long shelf life. If not, then by the time it gets to where it's going, it won't have, much time left before it's out of date.
Amen.
Great comment. Who else?
Stuff in cities instead of out in the woods is totally different.
Yep.
Yes, the urban center versus rural definitely has an impact, and also access to major water ports, transportation networks, and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the workforce would be totally different too.
Agree. Completely agree. Well, great input. Thank you for sharing. So let's look at some of the current trends governing site selection. Starting from the left and moving ourselves around, we'll look at strategic positioning of inventories. We have fast moving profitable items versus slower moving, less profitable items. We have a greater use of customer direct delivery from manufacturing. We have a growing use of and need for strategically located cross-docking facilities. Greater emphasis on access to major airports and or ocean ports for import and export shipments. And then the greater use of providers of 3PL services. All that influences site selection.
Wow.
Now let's look at modeling approaches for supply chain network design. So what we have in figure 4.4 is supply chain complexity. On the far left, we have two locations of sources of raw materials or components, S1 or S2. We have 3 plants, plants 1, 2, and 3. We have 3 plant warehouses, 1, 2, and 3. We have 5 forward warehouses, 1 through 5, and we have 6 customers, CRs 1 through 6. And what the so what of this illustration is to identify the complexity of a supply chain. If we were to look at the different paths where we can get from the raw materials to the customer, we can do that mathematically by looking at 2 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 6. And that identifies all the different possible paths that we see here in this nodes and arcs illustration. So 2 times 3 is 6, times 3 is 18, times 5 is 90, right? 5 times, is it 90 or 80? 5 times 15, that would be 5 times 15 is actually 75 times 6. And I'm not even going to try that math right now. If anybody has a calculator, go ahead and do it. But the bottom line is it shows the complexity of what our design could be. You can go from supply chain 1 to P2 to PWT to FW3 to CR3. You can go from S1 to P1 to PW1 to FW2 to CR2. And you have all these different paths that you could possibly take. Oh, by the way, you can maybe take from all the different sources. You're not limited to just one of each. So this is a simplistic representation of a supply chain to show the complexity. And this leads into a great discussion on the classic objective was to look at finished goods and distribution centers, where today's objective looks at procurement, distribution centers, the transportation flows, the various stages of manufacturing. The so what here is answering network design questions today is virtually impossible without the help of very powerful decision support tools, or DSTs. So we need those quantitative tools to help us make that decision. So the different types of modeling approaches, we have optimization models, which are designed to find the best or optimum solution while recognizing relevant constraints. Hold on, what? We have simulation models, which are designed to develop a computer representation of supply chain network design and observe changes as cost structures, constraints, and other factors are varied. And then we have heuristic models, which are designed to reduce a problem to a manageable size and search automatically through various alternatives in an attempt to find a better solution. So we have 3 modeling approaches. You can do optimization models, simulation models, or heuristic models. Again, we can have an entire course dedicated to each of these modeling approaches. For the purpose of this class, I just want to expose you to the different modeling approaches. So some potential supply chain modeling pitfalls you want to avoid: having short-term horizon. What we mean by short-term horizon, not looking at a long enough time horizon. So are you looking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Is the appropriate time, should it have been 10 years or should it have been 20 years? That's what we're talking about with a time horizon. Too little or too much detail, thinking in only 2 dimensions, using published costs as opposed to forecasting what the cost may be, inaccurate or incomplete costs, fluctuating model inputs, the use of erroneous analytical techniques, or a lack of appropriate robustness analysis, which incorporates that sensitivity analysis or what-if analysis that we were talking about before. So before going into a discussion on omni-channel network design, are there any questions up to this point?
No.
Okay. Any other thoughts, or do you feel like you're getting a lot out of tonight's chat? Okay, well, with that, we'll go ahead and cover omni-channel network design. Now, we're not going to go into the weeds on all of this. Great to hear. Thank you for sharing. So let's first define what omni-channel retailing is. First, it's a direct-to-consumer D2C business model where all sales channels ranging from online, mobile, telephonic, mail order, self-service, and physical retail establishments are aligned in fulfillment processes integrated to provide consumers with a seamless shopping experience in alignment with the company's brand proposition. So the three important elements are omni-channel strategy must align with the firm's go-to market strategy. The fulfillment processes must be integrated regardless of order entry point. And the ease of shopping for the consumer is a priority regardless of where or how the order is placed. So those are the three important elements. Now, there are numerous omni-channel designs, which I'll cover high level here in a minute. First, let's look at the marketing channel versus logistics channel. The typical retail logistics and marketing channels are defined by the following. The logistics channel has a supplier with a transportation flow to the manufacturer, with a transportation flow to the distribution centers and fulfillment center, with a transportation flow to either the retail store or the consumer. The marketing channel, on the other hand, has an e-procurement, which leads to the national account sales, which flows to the wholesaler or distributor, which then flows to the internet site or the retail customer, which then flows to the consumer. An important consideration to think about is the fixed cost and variable cost consideration. A rule of thumb here in channel design is the following. Assuming that the origin and destination remain the same, the more intermediaries, which are those points between where the product starts and where it ends up in the consumer's hands, there is a higher fixed cost, but a lower variable cost and vice versa. Now, when we look at omni-channel network design, there are a number of different customer order fulfillment models. And again, I have a lot of backup slides that cover each of these in a lot more detail. But those fulfillment models include dedicated fulfillment, pool distribution, direct store delivery, flow through fulfillment, store fulfillment, integrated fulfillment. For each of these fulfillment models, there is a really nice illustration that covers them. So for example, in the backup slides, I have integrated fulfillment where we start with the supplier or distribution center. There is a shipping or truckload or less than truckload to a retail distribution center. From there, there is a shipping or less than truckload to the retail store or directly to the consumer. From the retail store, it goes to the consumer. So as you can see, what differentiates this model from others is you have an option to go from the retail distribution center directly to the consumer or to a retail store directly to the consumer. And we've identified the advantages and disadvantages of this particular model. And I have this for each of those fulfillment models, whether it be the dedicated fulfillment, pool distribution, direct store delivery, store fulfillment, flow through fulfillment. And all of those are identified with a good illustration with various advantages and disadvantages of each. Now, the purpose of this class is not to be an expert on omni-channel design, but I want to at least expose you to what that's all about. So in summary, tonight we talked about the following. The strategic importance of supply chain network design decision is growing with the increasing globalization of manufacturing, marketing, sourcing, and procurement. We looked at a formal structured process for network design. We looked at all the factors that may affect the design of a logistics network. We also looked at different modeling approaches, and we briefly covered omni-channel environments and all the models that exist that can be used to service retail stores and internet consumers, each of which has advantages and disadvantages. So with that, class, are there any questions or comments on tonight's live chat?
No, not this time.
Okay, great. Anybody, any other questions or comments? Hope you learned a lot tonight. And just to reiterate, if you attended tonight's live chat and you're in my class, all you have to do is state in the submission that you attended the live chat, and I'm fine with that. Just say I was there, and I will trust your word. For those that are in other classes, just let your instructor know that you attended the chat, And if you run into any challenges, just send me an email and I can assist, but I don't anticipate that you will. And for those that are listening to the archive chat, just provide a brief summary on what was covered, and you will get those 15 points of extra credit as well. Well, class, if there are no questions or comments on the assignments or what we covered tonight, thank you so much for attending tonight's live chat, and I look forward to seeing you on the discussion board. Have a wonderful evening.
Have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.